Happy New Year and good evening to our esteemed viewers. This is the Limelight and my name is Tsima Polo. Welcome to the program. Around this time, as the year begins, we expect the schools to open very soon. And around this time, the discussion in the population is around the school fees as parents prepare to take back children and learners to school. And the discussion largely rotates around whether parents will afford school fees, especially in a liberalized education sector dominated by private sector players in the education sector. And the discussion has always centered on how government can intervene, possibly introduce a policy on regulating the school fees and exorbitant students' requirements that are charged by institution owners and proprietors around this time. And this call has been answered partly because government has tabled a proposal before cabinet introducing a school fees regulation policy. It is still in a draft, but once cabinet approves this policy, then possibly things may change. And when this proposal was rolled out a few weeks ago, it attracted mixed reactions from sections of the public. One section welcoming the move, while another section, especially the private sector players in the education sector, questioning its applicability. And that is why we host Geoffrey Busobozi, and he is the chairman coalition of private schools associations and unions, to look into this matter. Welcome to the program this evening.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Moses, for having invited me.
Apollo.
So sorry. For having invited me and hosting me this evening. Happy New Year, our viewers outside there and listeners.
Good. Let's go straight and pick your opinion on what you think the draft policy on school fees, regulating school fees, means to you. What you pick from this policy, proposed policy?
Well, I'm going to answer you from a private player perspective. For us in the private schools, we wouldn't have a problem with regulating school fees as proposed by the government of Uganda. However, there are certain reservations that we hold, and we think more needs to be done before these proposals are effected. I'll tell you why. Constitutionally, because the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, government has a duty to provide education to its citizens.
True.
Because education is a right. Now, because government cannot fully, mark my English, government cannot fully provide education to its citizens, it was able to liberalize, and the birth of private education came to be.
Okay.
Now today in a country called Uganda, we have private education and public education. The whole of the pre-primary is entirely in the hands of the private sector. In the secondary sector, it is more than it is in the public.
Yeah.
The secondary schools which are private are far, far more than they are in the public domain. In the primary sector, we are almost now reaching the 50% mark.
Okay.
Now, when the government proposed capping these school fees, To me, as a parent, yes, I feel it. Because education in itself is meant to be a service and not a business.
Okay.
The private education providers are meant to provide education to this country as a service to supplement and complement the government of Uganda, so that the citizens of the country do not miss out on education. Because there is the other area where you have got the UPE, which is universal, free education pure. Then you have USE, which is also universal, secondary education pure. And then you have the UPOLET, the post-secondary tertiary education institutions, where you have the technical, name it. However, because government cannot absorb everybody in its schools, that's why you have these private schools. Now, when you give me a cap and you say, you have not to exceed at this level,
Okay.
what is the basis of your determination to tell me so?
Godfrey, whenever government is coming with a policy or any program, there is a process. I hope there has been a series of consultations, and that is what I want to ask you. Were you consulted as private sector players?
The answer is yes and no. Because you see, now there are so many stakeholders in education. You cannot limit this to only who you refer to as the directors, the service providers of education, who are the owners of schools. You see, education has a lot of other key stakeholders in it who must be involved in the decision making.
So consultation stopped at only directors of schools and institutions?
Limitedly, not to everybody. For instance, do you know, as you hear the word private, the only source of income for these private schools is privately generated. Government does not give entirely assistance to these private schools. But you have to be very careful when we are debating this, because government has its own schools, which are 100% pure government schools. But it also has schools which are mistakenly called government schools, but they are only government aided. They are not government schools. And then there are also private schools which government aids to facilitate. Government facilitates some of these private schools to keep them running, but they are purely private schools. Because remember, earlier on, we had the PPP, the public-private partnership, which was shielded because of abuses. It was majorly intended to supplement the USE. That was put aside. Now, when you cap these school fees, let us be sincere and factual. Most of these private schools, when you look at the proposal of government, of the 690,000 shillings and the 1.6 respectively, 690 for nursery and 1.6 for secondary, you will realize that today in this country called Uganda, there are schools which don't even charge 450,000 schools for, sorry, 450,000 shillings for secondary education. But again, there are also private nursery schools which are charging 2 million shillings for a nursery kid.
Don't you think the policy now comes to cure that? If we have a nursery school that charges 2 million a term, don't you think that is exorbitant in one or another? You
see, a policy should be blind. It shouldn't segregate. It should involve everybody.
Now it brings a cap. It introduces a
now,
cap.
For this cap to be, there should have been clear demarcations as to why it was. The schools which are charging exorbitantly are very few. They are held here. And you'll be amazed that these are not necessarily private schools.
Then, what is the problem then with government introducing such a policy?
The issue is managerial and administrative. It's because those ones who hold the power to manage the affairs of the state Some of them are sleeping on their job. This policy, we are operating a liberalized economy, for heaven's sake.
Are you concerned about its applicability? What was application of the policy, or you?
Yes, you can't. You see, its applicability. How do you apply this policy? Because it is segregation. It is segregating. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
But you said you're a parent.
Yes, I am.
Do you see anything good in this policy?
There is nothing good in this policy. Ask me why. How many Ugandans can afford 1.6 million shillings when you are still paying a primary school teacher less than 500,000 shillings a month? And you are capping this at 1.6 million shillings.
But capping does not mean that everybody, every institution will go as high as that, will charge as high as that.
The moment you bring that not every, that means this is a discriminatory policy. It is discriminating. And I have told you we are operating a free market economy. The government liberalized. So the market forces determine the prices.
The decision to liberalize has been challenged, and now government is reversing the policy somehow.
So if government is reversing the policy,
we are going back to the mixed economy.
If government is reversing the policy of liberalization, then we need to change the guidelines for these private education providers. Because remember, now you are looking at secondary and below. Yeah. What of the university? How come that they have not capped the charges for these courses which are charged at the university?
Possibly it will come later.
You see?
Let me take you back to the same policy. It also introduces, it is called a school charges and fees regulation committee. And this committee will also look into the exorbitant school requirements that are charged by institutions. Do you find that also good or bad?
You see, I have had
school requirements, exorbitant school requirements.
I have had a discussion in different fora over this. Because the whole essence of this is to have quality education. But the question is, how do you define quality? When you are referring to quality, what do you mean? There are so many people in this country who are very rich. They have their lots and lots of money. And they are taking their kids to international schools and other schools which are local but charging a lot of money. And the only way how they can spend that money is to live luxuriously with their kids. As the Baganda say, ememe katali. You can't spend what you don't have.
You talked about discrimination. Doesn't that nurture a discriminatory, a society where it's actually breed discrimination in society?
And that was my essence. That's why I told you, this issue is about the governance system. The managers of education should be able to regulate, and they are in a position to take charge. It's not about the cost of school fees payment.
What is it?
I have told you we have got USE, where people don't pay even 100 shillings. I have told you we have schools which are paying less than 450,000 shillings secondary education boarding. Their schools, people are paying 150,000 shillings. And for you government, you are saying you are capping it at 1.6 and 690,000 respectively. What does that one mean? So it is just a matter of choice.
It's a matter of choice, but I don't know. I don't know why. So you're proposing we maintain the status quo?
If we are going to have this school fees capping, we need to go back on the drawing board, and we bring more stakeholders. We discuss this exhaustively, and then we are in a position to see if we are going to do the capping, what is this yardstick that we have used to determine the charges for this. Because these schools raise school fees depending, by the way, I have told you these are market forces. Because you parents keep on pushing the school managers. You want good life. you want luxury for your child in the school. These are schools for the rich. And it is a natural phenomenon.
But where we started off, we agreed education is a right.
Yes.
It shouldn't be, I mean, we shouldn't have some section of the public, enjoying the one a right more than the others. It should be a right. It should be enjoyed uniformly.
Absolutely. Now that's where the gist of the matter lies. Aware that education is a right, and it is the responsibility of government to give me education as my right. Then this capping which they have given should be universal. It should cut across such that everybody is held within that capping. Because we are looking now at affordability. Government should come out, either it says there is no provision of private education in Uganda, or when you are a service provider of education and you are giving private provision of education to the masses, the limit is at the bare minimum not exceeding 400,000 shillings, such that it is affordable to everybody. But once you give these of 690, 1.6, no.
A section of the public thinks that possibly this policy would work well if it is only introduced in government schools only. What do you think? In government-aided schools or government schools?
But you see, that is where the challenge lies. You can only dictate terms in your own home if you are a manager.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you bring your dictation in my home where you have no jurisdiction? That's why I have told you. Either government chooses to provide education fully within its schools and abolishes private education provision as a policy, and it cuts across, or it reduces the school fees for everybody universally, and then we know everybody can afford to access all these schools. I don't want to mention people's schools here on air. But the whole essence is that these schools which charge exorbitantly are very few indeed. And these schools are preserved for the rich. And the concern from us parents has been, why are they limiting our children from attaining education with Apollo's child? Because I also want my child to study with Apollo's child in school X. Why is school X hidden away from the rest of us? But that cannot stop to suffice if you're operating a private entity in a liberalized economy. That may not stand if the policy was not of a free market economy where the forces of demand will determine the price.
You're parting short on, because it is still now before cabinet. It awaits cabinet approval. You're parting short on this matter.
I would call upon government that whereas the proposal is good, it is all about affordability of education. Let this money be revised universally such that everybody can be taken care of where the capping ends. I would propose not more than 400,000 shillings at maximum. Because education is very expensive. Now, these challenges which you are bringing in of the 1.6, the 690, why do these school fees go higher? It's because the service called education, which is provided by these private schools, they put in extra. For instance, if you are going to play PE, in your other school, you are buying a ball at 50,000 shillings. In this other school where the school fees is high, I will buy a ball of 200,000 shillings. Now, my parting shot tonight is that let the parents improve their own schools where they are. Let the management committees, the parents teachers associations take charge of their schools within their localities, such that the demand for the other so-called good schools goes down, and then the market forces will solve this. But this business of capping, and still the money is very high, it's as if there is nothing that has been done. I thank you.
Well, viewers, as it stands, we must wait and possibly see what comes out of cabinet, because it's still a proposal. What we received is just a draft, and once it is approved, possibly we will see a shift and balance somehow. That's what we think, and we pray that possibly the two sides, the two sections of the public who are disagreeing about this policy go back to the table and agree on how best this policy can be implemented, can be applied, because it has been long overdue. We've been talking about it, and I must thank you so much, Godfrey Busobozi.
Thank you.
Chairman of the Coalition of Private School Associations and Unions. Thank you so much for your time, viewers. Let's wait and see how it pans out. But indeed, school charges, somehow, they have been exorbitant. I feel it and have felt it over time. And possibly, something must be done. My name is Simapolo. Let's catch up again next Friday. It is the Limelight. Good evening, and have a splendid weekend.